conference is composed of. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, Cy.
Hello, Cy.
Hello,
Pleasure,
all.
Brad. Hello, everyone.
It's good. It's good to be together. It's very good to be together. If you two are okay, I'll do a little bit of setup if that's all right, just ever so quickly.
Yes, please.
Gentlemen, excellent, excellent. So definitively welcome the audience, whether you are live with us or listening to the recording. This is a bit of a mini conference. This is a bit of a mini conference that we've set up around the art of war in the wild. So really to explore with a number of panels how the principles and the practices and the instruments within the wisdom have been put into practice. Just as a backdrop, and bear with me as I just sort of do a little bit of setup here. Just as a backdrop, the world is experiencing a crisis, a leadership crisis on a pretty massive scale, in many, many different forms, in many different dimensions. And there's a lot of widespread, of course, struggle and suffering that is out there within organizations, within families, right, within all sorts of social units all around. And really, a lot of what we're experiencing in many forms is because of how we've approached leadership, amongst other things. And in particular, there's a romanticizing of leadership that's occurred out there, human nature and reality. There's definitively even a sterilization of organizations and what they do and enterprises. And also, if I can say it this way, an infantilization of people in leadership roles, which have created a lot of these challenges that we are now essentially dealing with. So what the art of war offers us is really a different vernacular and a different approach and a profound timeless wisdom to tap into to navigate some of these challenges. So the panels, and we're of course the first panel of the ones that are forthcoming, really is to engage. The objective of these panels is to engage in conversations with folks that have been both forward thinkers and forward doers. So specifically, not too interested in those that just talk about the stuff, right? And very, very deliberately, the forward thinkers as well as the forward doers, to really explore how the set of principles, the set of practices, if you will, have been advancing their journey relative to leveraging the art of war. So through that process, we'll definitely discover and explore, the application of the art of war to modern scenarios, and most definitively illuminate different insights. And I assure you, Brad Barton, Mark Ferraro have a tremendous amount of insights to share with the audience. So a pleasure to welcome you both, gentlemen. And I've been talking too long, so please welcome.
Thank you very much, Cy. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Cy.
Most welcome. So starting off with introductions, gentlemen, would love for you to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I can jump in if you'd like. My name is Brad Barton, and of course, I've known these two other gentlemen for quite a number of years. We actually, our journey together started, goodness, I don't know, 2 decades ago at this point, maybe even more.
It was,
Mark and I were actually a client of Cy as a consultant, and really it was through work that we did together at a former employer of ours and former client of his that we began to unpack really what it meant to transform organizations into a healthier state and really improve effectiveness. And the work that we did during that time has stuck with me through everything that I've done since. And these days I am a head of product for a startup organization, SCORE, based in Southeast PA, and really continue to practice all that I learned working with Cy and what I do there at SCORE and in all that I do in life these days.
Very good. Thanks, Brad. Mark Ferraro, like Brad said, we came together 2 decades ago at an organization, looking to get to a better place. We found Cy, came in, and helped show us an approach to transformation and a new way to really help change and shift that organization get to a better place. What we saw there, certainly what I saw there, was something that I never forgot. It's always stayed with me. That has taken me into consulting practices. Really, once you do it and see the shift and what you can do, not only with enterprises and organizations, but the individual transformations and helping them get to a better place, led me into consulting. So following, it was a state agency at the time, working there and being able to shift the state agency and that amount of change. Went through consulting in lots of different large and small organizations, spent many years as consulting, but recently have been hired into organizations doing transformation. Recently did a session of several years at Disney, helping them apply agile lean best practices. And then currently working with Lockheed Martin, helping them with one of their biggest projects they've ever taken under. And it's really all about one LMX, which is one Lockheed Martin transformation. So just sweeping transformation and all along the way, it's been the art of war. We've referenced as the coaching manual, really the framework or a reference point to really base all the practices and whatever we're doing with clients, really looking back and to the wisdom of the art of war and how it fits. And it's really pretty astonishing how the wisdom of 2,300 years ago and how relevant it is today and how it can be applied. And not only to, the way it's been put into, some of the modern management practices in terms of vision and purpose and servant leadership and some of these things that are explicitly out of the art of war, but even looking forward into what people don't see as modern practice, things like anti-fragility and teaming and some of these other things that are explicitly referenced in the art of war and how to get to a point where the people, it's really beyond agility, which has been our focus towards anti-fragility. Anyhow, so that's me. Always a pleasure to be in the presence with Cy and Brad. Always a good time.
Likewise, sentiments mutual with both of you. Ever so briefly, I've been doing this type of work, if you will, as a coach, consultant, practitioner is really key for me, and likewise as a gentleman, and having the privilege of working with these two fine gentlemen. I've done this for, I like to say, far too long and close to 5 decades at this juncture, if you will. Hundreds of organizations, thousands of individuals, really helping them calibrate their business models and their operating models. And the most sense, I look at myself as a student of life, a pracademic in praxis, really mixing the theory and the practice, exactly as the two gentlemen have emphasized. Likewise, at the end of the day, a student of human nature and human dynamics in the context of, if you will, really the human condition. And the human animal, as I've always said, can be quite magnificent and also quite dangerous in its natural habitat. So that's a little bit about me. Gentlemen, what does the art of war mean to you personally?
You want to start, Brad?
Sure. Happy to jump in. I think, I'm what it means to me. I think, maybe take a step back to how I was introduced and really how it landed with me. I think, perhaps maybe brushed up against it before. I worked alongside of yourself, Cy, but really looked at it with a bit more of a critical eye and really consumed it in a different way through your introduction to the work. And the thing that always sticks with me is how much conceptually the teachings really resonated with me and seemed to speak to things that I felt intuitively. So it is, on some level, for myself, it's a grounding. And whenever I return to the text, it really helps me to recenter and kind of reorient around my worldview and just generally how to the lens through which I look at all things, but especially things that encounters with, you know, conflict in business, conflict in life. I think it is. We say the coaching manual, but it is really I think even beyond that, more a blueprint for the my worldview, and you know how I perceive the world around me.
Well said.
Very
Mr.
well said,
Ferraro.
Brad. You know, yeah, I think definitely, you know, the things Brad's saying, I think echoing a lot of those for sure. Um, I think introduced to it. I think it was you, Sai. I have the copy. I think this is actually a copy you signed back in the day, over 20 years ago, and reference it frequently. What's interesting is um, a lot of the stuff is for some natural leadership patterns, right? So you can look at, you know, once you look at, as Brad said, getting into the text and see how it's anchored. But there is a leadership style, a lot of the servant leadership styles, and you know the things that are working. And when we're working with organizations to transform them to a healthier place, a lot of the wisdom some people are, you know, pick it up very naturally, right? And then they can get to a whole other level when they get through it, and then introducing those folks to the text, and then they can really start anchoring and tuning their understanding and their worldview of how they see things. And you know, it's, you know, introducing it to, you know, especially those folks that already have that view, that, you know, you bring in the title and like, what do you mean the art of war? You know, that's not how you get anything done. It's all about, building bridges and bringing people together and forming the connections. And then when you start explaining it, you know, the art of war, it foundationally is about, you know, how to really navigate conflict in a healthy way, to appreciate conflict and appreciate the context and the ecosystem that you're operating in, and then shape it in ways to get them to a healthier place. Explicitly, it comes out, you know, the best generals are the ones that can achieve victory without going to battle, right? Without aggression, right? So, yeah, I guess that's, and you know, looking at even foundationally, the first chapter talks about appraisals, and really that has been, even tactically, it's funny how the book goes from conceptual high level into some of the tactical stuff. And I think even appraisals is where it gets tactical. It says how, when you're looking at the organization, or in this case the military, you know, you can say, hey, do they have purpose? You know, do they have the Tao? Do they have appreciation for context? You know, when it talks about appraisals, talks about the five, and it is those five that we look at pretty explicitly as we go into coaching engagements. So, hope that helps.
Very well said. Likewise, gentlemen. And it's interesting because if you look at and I love the words that you used, grounding and its naturalness, almost intuitive perspective that comes into play, and the manual spans coaching and beyond. For me, I was introduced to it through my father, of course, through numerous renditions and techniques of reading it forwards, backwards, amongst other books, and I've shared some of that before. But that definitely triggers the mind to digest some of this stuff differently, to say the least. And then ultimately, I have arrived, as I like to call it, it's the art of human nature. At this point, I don't refer to it so much as the art of war, but really the art of human nature, and the deliberateness and the deliberateness with which one engages it or is introduced to it and then lives it experientially in the real world becomes very, very different. Exactly like you're both emphasizing. If I, at the end of the day, what it means to me today, I guess, based on our journey, I'll just say it that way. I feel like it helps in a shift, and the shift is going from what I've now termed, in a sense, the vicious ego-based reality control cycle, where people are trying to control reality, to the virtuous ecosystem or ecologically based reality navigation cycle.
Yep.
And we have to navigate, you know, where we're acknowledging and engaging and working with conflict.
Yeah.
And that's,
I think it's really well said. I think we've all encountered it. You probably have encountered it easily the most with the most organizations, but everybody's looking for the answer, right? Everybody's looking outside for the answer and not necessarily uh, tuning into what's occurring around them and really trying to make better sense of how can I make my own reality more attuned to what it is we're trying to accomplish. And um, everybody wants to roll over the next guy. Everybody wants to change the way of thinking of the unit next to them or the department down the hall. And it really is, it's a different perspective to come at things with this belief that you really can take the whole.
I think, Sai, that you were getting at it too, is talking about the shift, and it was a pleasure. And again, thank you for so much for putting these panels together, or essentially this conference, a series of talks. I mean, watching the last session with James Gimian, one of the original members of the Denma group that did the translation, it was a real treat. It was interesting hearing him talk about the leadership styles, and I think what you're saying, the shift from the command and control, or the hero that has to have all the answers, to really more of the servant leadership style. The ones that doesn't have to have all the answers, but whose job is more to connect the dots, to have the appreciation of that unit down the hall, as Brad said, but not try to take them over, but really try to understand where they're coming from. Right? What is it that drives them? What motivates them? What's their Tao? Right? What's their purpose? Right? And taking that to the same place. I think that's similar. It's fun watching some of these things come together and connecting the dots with other works we looked at. Tribal leadership, for example, is very much talks about that shift from from an I-centric culture and to the we-centric culture, and they talk about the chasm in between and how difficult it is to get the organizations from that I-centric, I'm the hero, I can tell people and command people what to do, to the we're great, and we come together and crossing that chasm and that dimension. And I really do think things like the art of war is just another tool to help focus the conversation, to share and really evoke conversation from clients and individuals to really help them see that, right? And it's not just leaders at in management positions, but really looking to folks at all levels, and really evoking their perspectives and their leadership. Getting, you said it again on the last conference, getting, we want sage commanders at every level, right? We want people that can really connect those dots and lead from their perspective, if you will, right? And then build an organization that is full of that type of leadership style. And that's when it starts getting to the point of a whole different level, the formlessness, if you will.
So interesting. Any sort of interesting stories to share and explore? I'll put it out there, kind of see what you might be thinking.
I think so we're talking the shift. I mean, I remember, doing some transformation work. It was up in Chicago at a .com, and just working with the organization, but specifically with this one individual. It was the CIO of this organization, and you could just see the stress, and the burden that she was bringing to work every day. Just coming in, heads down, and then the tone, and again, talking culture, language, behavior, relationships, and just looking at her from that perspective, the where she was. The tone she used with the people, the language that she used with the folks around her, and then helping through that transformation, going through the transformation approach that we've applied, the 3 phases to really define, create, and really the process of helping an organization find a better place, and walking with her along that journey. And then just it was the shift. It was a point in time where she could start to see the teams around her were starting to produce, and she could see the vision was becoming a reality. A lot of the talk ahead of that was, hey, we need to, put some of these teams together, allow them to self-organize, and a lot of the stuff that we talked about, but then seeing it start to deliver. And having the conversations with her, and you could see her get to another place, to the point where she was coming in, head high with a whole different tone, just engaging people in more of a, certainly a much lighthearted way than it had been. So that's one, just, and watching time and time again, seeing people go through that, through the shift. That's the part that just never gets old.
So what do you sort of think were some of the key tipping points, if you will, that really anchored that journey around? And likewise, Brett, I think all the journeys we've shared in one form or another for amongst all three of us. So definitely, what are some of the tipping points that you think anchored us, gentlemen, or anchored that shift?
I think in this one, go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say, I think, one of the things that all of us have always sought to do is creating the space to really allow for folks to better appreciate the environment that they operate in. And it's amazing. I think not uncommon in our culture. Folks are very, as Mark said, eye-centric. What do I need? How do I accomplish my tasks? And too often don't really even stop long enough to understand how their part fits into the larger picture. And simply creating the space and encouraging folks to spend the time to better understand how what they do interrelates to the other aspects of whatever they're involved in. It really does start to create that shift. It's amazing just how much a little bit of time spent trying to understand other perspectives might actually open your eyes to the ways that we might be able to work more effectively together, and how when really seeing the whole, there really is that shared purpose, and that really gives us something that we can anchor to together.
Very nice.
I think, yeah. So space, in those things, the ones that I always call out is really the appreciation of identity, right? And really having just simple conversations with folks. The who am I? Who are we?
Yeah.
And really asking them that. Say, hey, who am I? Hey, I'm a tester. I come in and I do testing, or I'm a developer. I come in and I do development. To helping them see a bigger picture. Hey, I'm part of this product team, right? I'm part of a team. Versus really shifting that identity to something bigger. To ultimately, I'm part of an organization. I'm part of not just this product group, but I'm really part of a product group that delivers this mission. And it's fun actually. At Lockheed Martin, at the very highest level, it's our mission is ahead of ready, right? Being there and really giving the warfighters what they need, so we aren't fighting wars, right? But getting them prepared to the point where they have what they need before they even need it. So it's not that, hey, I'm creating this product or this service, but hey, I'm really helping prepare the nation so we don't have to go to battle.
Very well said. And I love the way I love the way you're both describing it, because very explicitly, really, if we talk about the five, we emphasize appreciating what's there. That's the ground that's commonly referred to, or the context, right? And then definitively the dynamics between all of those things is the heaven, as referred to by the book. So it's those two aspects coming together. And I for the folks joining us today, or listening to the recording, we definitely don't push and put the art of war in people's faces. We talk about it in very practical terms, and then they experience it. But those are the two elements that we literally are raising awareness to, which is very powerful.
Yeah, if the art of war comes in, is generally at the end of an engagement, or after that shift, or after we can see them experience that shift. I see the art of war. It's kind of like one of those Pixar movies with a layered humor, right? So you can read it on the surface and see one thing, but once you experience it and go through it, then you're starting to see the other layers that are really below the surface. And quite honestly, getting ready for this webinar, looking at it again, after not seeing it for some time, you see a whole other level. So and a whole other level of appreciation. So there's definitely layers to the onion there.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Brad, stories or thoughts that come to your sort of perspective or immediately kind of come to mind? Anything to share there?
I think when the three of us talk, I'm always taken back to the earliest days and really um, imagining the state that we were in when we started to work with yourself, and really finding those points of energy inside of the organization, and really beginning to connect folks in different ways, and reorienting the shared ownership of things towards the actual mission of the organization, when we were a very dysfunctional organization with um, what I think we were 2,000 2,400 at the time, I think, if I recall correctly, and lots of sub optimization, departmental goals, and misalignment, and to watch as we really did bring folks together in new ways, and shift the thinking, and really reorient the organization. It was magical to see the change in perspectives and the change in attitudes, and really uh, the opening of eyes to what was possible.
Yeah,
I think that's
the
the one that always
engagement
sticks
level.
out for me. But and then on the smaller scale, with a lot of consulting clients, and um, and even I'd say these days it's more personal practice for me. It's how I navigate the challenges of being part of a very small organization, or a small and fast growing organization, and just uh, rapidly shifting organization that every day is a new reality, and quite frequently new challenges are injected, and it's similar but different to practice in that sort of environment, and really to think about things in that same way, but at a smaller scale.
Yeah. I think the individual transformations I think are as fun as the enterprise transformation, seeing where the engagement that when we were together in that state agency, the level of engagement was just people. There was the motivation was low because people the work, they didn't see the value that the work was adding. So there was it was people coming in late, leaving early. They had people at the door, so watching when people would come and go, to going through the shift and the transformation where people were given some space and they were able to really contribute and see the value of the contribution, and how they were really, not just chipping the rocks there anymore, but really helping students get to college, right? Really get them through, the aid that they needed at that organization. And to the point where they're putting in long hours, and the zeal and the effort that and it wasn't because anybody told them to, but they saw the value of the engagement. The personal well-being was just on a whole different level. It was just that, individually, just as an organization, across the organization, people were just at a much healthier place. I think that same one, I think another story was, working together at, one of the .coms in Chicago. It was walking into the transformations, they always get the list, right? Hey, these people aren't going to make it. These people aren't going to make it. These are the troublemakers, right? And if I, presented with that, it's like, I don't want to see it. Let me draw my own conclusions. Please do not show me the list. Let's get through, give some people some space, let them experience it a bit, and see where we're at. And there was a person, that was on that list, but next thing you know, we're working with them, get through the transformation. And they were presenting side by side within a year and a half. I think they were presenting at the Agile conference they became a top contributor to that organization, to the point where they represented that organization, sharing the story of their transformation at one of the biggest Agile conference going on. So.
Good stuff. It's the two key concepts, right, from the Art of War, is, as you described the journeys on both of your parts, is definitively, when we say appreciation, it's helping people recognize that taking hold, there's something more than themselves, exactly as you emphasized, and also leaning into the Tao, which is another aspect of it, but definitively having an appreciation for taking hold. And then I think you both said the word energy, the sheer. So being able to identify where those points of energy are, create sheer, or cultivate
Yeah.
sheer, to be more proper, and then definitively wait for the timing in terms of the node to
The
emerge
node.
in order to be able to activate some of
Yeah.
those points of energy in such a way. So again, as I listen to the stories, I tear up, quite honestly, because to me it's very powerful to be able to have lived it, right, and be able to talk about it in such a way that we don't have to use the explicit language of the art of war. And
Yeah.
I think that comes
Yep.
honestly from being practitioners,
Yep.
because most people that talk just talk. Practitioners
Yeah.
do it and then reflect on the wisdom.
So I'll give an example of the node too. You know, again, it was at that same .com in Chicago. It was the sheer shaping the context, getting and working with the leadership. So I remember you bring in this guy, and if you get to meet Cy in person, he is very big in wisdom, but in terms of the stature, you know, he's not the tallest guy in the room. But there was probably this, I don't know, the guy's 6'4", 6'5". I mean, he was a big guy, one of the leaders, and just real strong personality in the organization. But you know, working with him over the course of the transformation, and you know, he a lot of times we'll get people that'll say that they're transforming, but then their actions aren't taking them that way. But working with them ahead of time, building the relationship, getting to know this person, but then continually not taking action, right? And you know, in the art of war, they talk about, you know, express with deeds, not words. You know, and this guy was all about the words, and then the node came when calling him out very much so. You know, first working individually, say, hey, you're gonna do it, but then calling him out in front of his peers very publicly to the point it brought the guy to tears when he realized what he was doing, right? And getting through that session, you know, getting through that, it was a very heated conversation, but it was the node, you know, what he needed to have the shift. Coming out of that, I remember him say, he came over, he thanked you, right? You had him until you called him out, confronted him from his peers. It was the harshest thing, one of the harshest things, confrontations that I've seen, but it was set up and you had the context around it, but then, you know, thank you for it. And him getting to the next place would really help the organization as a whole get to a better place. Very much an example of the node.
Of the node, definitely.
Yeah.
You give me far too much credit, my good friend. We did all those things together, all three of us, quite honestly. So definitively, it's things that we've done together. But you do pose an interesting question, right? Or an interesting thought. I think if we push into it, it's not always easy, right? Not everybody sees the whole.
No.
Right? How about those
Yeah, and I think,
other challenging situations, gentlemen?
I think the ones that come to mind are, again, I think in transformation, there's the folks that, you know, that you can start to shift and they do start to move. But there's some that really dig their heels in and they really stick to their ways of being. And, you know, I think what's been interesting over the years is the way those things tend to self-correct, right? That you don't necessarily always have to go. I mean, it's not an HR conversation where we got to remove the people from the organization, right? But they start getting isolated. You know, in the art of war, it's that you don't go after the walled cities. You know, you go after the alliances first, and then going after, you know, really transforming all around them to the point where they become an island. And they, at that point, they can see the shift and they come along, or they self-select and leave the organization. But either way, you know, you can get, you know, the cancerous thinking out, and you can get the folks more aligned on a common purpose and move forward together.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll say this as clearly as I want to, but the fact is, I think in our society, we elevate those who perhaps aren't necessarily the sorts who look to take the whole. We condition folks to, to win at all costs and to win in ways that are require aggression and direct conflict and we value that and we elevate that and we reward that behavior. And I think one of the things that's most interesting is when you do encounter folks in these organizations who are accustomed to being, again, elevated and rewarded for those behaviors. And um, it is possible you're going to encounter folks who can't necessarily shift to a perspective where uh, you help them to understand that you can win without destroying everything around you, and that there is such a thing as a scenario where we all win collectively, and where we see a purpose and a reward greater than what's in it for me. And I think the fact is that, we've encountered a lot of those folks, but there are folks that you can turn the light on for them, and really bring them along for the ride. And I think it's always interesting when you do help someone make that shift.
Very, very well said, gentlemen. And really, it goes to some of the core of applying the art of war is not an attempt to change, if you will, people's nature. It is to really work with the nature of those things. And I think you're both emphasizing it. We don't actually we don't we don't talk about changing people. We don't do that. I mean, I know we all get a visceral negative reaction to when we hear that, right? Come in and fix my people. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Yep.
But rather we truly work with the nature of things, and then move it toward in terms of taking hold and what have you. So
I think
it's,
that's
it's great
helping to
hearing.
shift the context, right? Getting people to see identity in a different place. And we're not changing them, but we're just opening their eyes to different viewpoints, different worldviews. So it's not always good or bad. It's just different.
Very much so. So another sort of question comes to my mind. I'd love your thoughts on this, because I think people touch the periphery of this topic but don't really delve into it. And so I'm gonna push into it a little bit, and that is the relationship between the sovereign or the ruler, and that relationship between that party and then the general or the commander, as both words are used in the translation. But that relationship is a very, very crucial, I'll say, relationship. So, any thoughts and
Yeah.
reflections on that, or where we've
I
seen it
think the
work
big
and
one,
where we've seen it not work, or those kinds of things? Forgive me, Mark, for interrupting you.
I think some of the challenges is when, you see the very highest in leadership, and I think it's to Brad's point, rewarding the wrong behavior. So like these big organizations spend, as much as they say they want to shift and transform, they're still rewarding the command and control type of leadership. They're still not opening their eyes themselves to the servant leadership, or really, to Brad's point, giving people the space, right? They think that, hey, you got to, be telling these people what to do, right? You got to be commanding and controlling, right? And that's what's rewarded at the highest levels. And I think the opportunities we get to, you know, whether the transformation comes from the top down, bottom up, or within, I think ultimately we need to get the top leadership to see that. So open up some space, get some wins within the organization. But then once they see that, they really do need to acknowledge that this is happening, that there really is something different here, right? It's not an anomaly, but that pattern that got this team to a whole new place, we can repeat that, right? But you got to provide the space, right? And it has to take on, they talk about the commander, they need courage, right? There needs to be a level of courage at the top levels, and everybody's got the boss, right? So even when you get there, then you got, the board of directors, there's always going to be somebody, but really the courage to confront whoever they need to provide the space to allow transformation, I think is the message, and again, a pattern where engaging is necessary, right? Transformation isn't just for the other people. Transformation is for yourself. You have to ask yourself the same tough question: who am I? Who are we together? Right? Look at your own identity. Is my identity command and control, or is my identity to connect these dots and provide the space?
Yeah, I think it's you touched on something really key there, right? Yeah, you're going to encounter those situations where those at the highest levels of an organization bring folks like these gentlemen in and say, fix my people.
Fix them.
Tell them how they should be working, and don't necessarily see the need for themselves to be engaged in a bit of shifting as well. And it is really critical that those individuals are also working with those who are, agents of the change, and the sage commander, and really willing to play a role in all the work that's being done, and not see it as something outside of their area of concern.
Well
I think
said.
it's a key
Hey,
relationship.
we wrote the check
Yeah.
for it. Now you fix it.
Yeah.
Versus them rolling their sleeves up and becoming part of the shift, and the shift themselves, really, to appreciate their ecosystem, right? And how can they operate more effectively within their ecosystem? What's their role?
And as the book emphasizes, and I think one of the key sort of underlying tenets that I say, one of the key underlying tenets, and I say sort of, but it's directly from the book, is that there are commands that the general receives from the sovereign, but chooses not to accept them because they compromise the taking whole aspect of it, amongst other things that come into play. And that is a very, and that goes back to the courage, that goes back to the changes, that goes back to also all sorts of the things that you've both mentioned. And it takes a lot to be able to do that, to say the least.
None of this stuff's easy, and I think that's part of, it really is the art of war. Is really, conflict isn't easy. Conflict it's work. I mean, it's effort. Getting, being knowledgeable in your context and getting to know the people around you and getting to know your ecosystem in a way that's necessary, so that you can help shape that context and be ready to act on the node when it's time to take decisive action. That can be a lot of lifting, right? However, the difference is, once you start doing it, you get a whole lot of folks around you. Once you don't have to have all the answers, and you can empower the folks around you and start building sage commanders at every level, then that's when you start getting more done. And I think James talked about it in the last webinar, getting more done by doing less, right? That people start getting aligned and they have this mindset, and the level of accomplishment is something that could never be, even imagined. And that was the shift. And again, I think that's part of what I saw when I talked about that leader back in Chicago, and the shift that she made. She just never imagined the level of productivity that was possible, and she didn't have all. She realized their whole day was putting out fires, and these fires were being put out by other people, or they weren't even coming up anymore. Right? It gets to a whole different way of thinking and operating. Yeah.
Any thoughts or anything, Brad, to add to sort of what Mark is saying, or anything?
No, I don't think anything to expand on here. Because all well said.
So another sort of aspect that comes into play in a lot of, you get into an organization, right, and or you're working with a team, or working with a group, or whatever it may be, any context, and there's perhaps a sovereign or a ruler or a sponsor who brought us in, or what have you, and they're not as, I'm going to use the word directly from the book, if you will, they're not perhaps as enlightened as they might be to, right, the taking whole aspects amongst other aspects.
Yeah.
And in those situations, we almost have to search, in a sense, for the right sovereigns, the right rulers. And right, in this case, the word right, I'm applying to the word enlightened.
I think it's fun, Si. You can look at some of your panel. I think there's some of those folks that we found in organizations, that they're past clients that we've worked with that would solve it early on and helped us to make the shift. So, yeah. I may have interrupted. You might have.
No. You're all good. All good. No. So it's interesting that what is really interesting is that for me, as I look at our journey specifically, and the way that we've applied the wisdom is, a lot of people would default. Hey, Mark, you brought me in, right? Okay, so I have to default to you being, using the words from the book again, enlightened, and that's the explicit word. Well, if you default to that, you may actually be compromising taking whole at that point, very, very unknowingly even. And at that point, I would say respectfully not behaving as a
Yep.
sage commander because you're neglecting it.
Oh, so I think some of the consultants, especially, the agile transformations, which is a space that we've worked in quite a bit, and you hear things like the scaled agile framework. They'll bring people in and they say, "Oh, you're coming in, you have all the answers," and I think a lot of people that are trying to apply transformation by imposing things like SAFe on organizations are doing just that. It's like, "Oh, here's the answer. Hey, SAFe says do it this way." And I think that's a huge miss. I think coming in and saying, "I don't have the answers," and admitting that I don't have the answers to your organization, but I can help you find those answers together. And I think that's where we've had our most successful transformations. It's like, hey, we're not going to tell you how to do it, but we're going to work with you and craft a better place. And that's how we captured in our little ebook we put together. Our conscious agility was saying coming in and help define. Hey, let's work together to define what that future is. We're not going to come in and say do this. We can use things like SAFe, make great reference material, right? Hey, SAFe has this practice. Would that help us? What do you think? Should we put something like that in, or how should we shape that for us? That's really part of getting the stakeholders engaging the ecosystem, asking them the questions. Where do we want to go, and how do we want to do that? And then doing it, right? Versus those people that come in, hey, we got the answers. Hey, you got to, put in the product manager and the product owner. They have to do this list of things, and you have to have this list of activities, and you're going to need to create these work products over here and go through these 47 training classes. That's not transformation. That's hand waving in a lot of cases.
Well said, all around. Anything, Brad, from your perspective? I got another question, but definitely any thoughts, please.
I think that the theme, and we touched on this quite a bit before, is really that appreciation of context, and really not thinking that there is one answer, or seeking to come in and blanket somebody with a set of practices, but really to appreciate what are the needs of the folks, the stakeholders in the ecosystem, and how do we reshape their experiences so that that the outcomes are far better than what they were achieving previously.
And because we're doing the art of war discussion here, it anchors directly back. In the first in appraisals, in the first they talk about victory as a military lineage cannot be transmitted in advance, right? Just because here's questions to ask, here's things that the victories of the past you can't transmit in advance. The context is too different, right? What they're saying is the heavens and the earth that they describe, or the sheer, or the context, essentially the ecosystem is so different. A pattern that worked in the past is not going to apply in the future, is not going to work in the moving forward. Pieces of it might, but just to drop it on top of an organization, it's not going to work.
Very well said. Very well said. And also, what intrigues me, and I say intrigues me in what's it called? It's got I'm trying to think of the right word now. It intrigues me, but in a almost sarcastic way. Is nowadays you hear a lot of people talk about being catalysts, right? That seems to be a popular term, especially on LinkedIn, which I quite honestly don't think most people can catalyze themselves out of a paper bag, let alone work with an environment to catalyze stuff. Or the other word is edge. And then the other one, big one, complexity. Everybody's talking about complexity. Well, complexity is all in the art of war, but we did it, and we continue to do it without having to reference it as such. So I'm always intrigued by how the language, right, catches up to some of the things ultimately. But that's,
I think, scale. We talk fighting the many is like fighting the few, right? The same patterns, the same wisdom that you get in the art of war, applying it to an individual applies to. It can scale to any level you need it to.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people kind of listening to our conversation will say, well, what is this? How is this? Whatever it might be. But all around, the one question that then comes to mind is, what are your suggestions for how people, for lack of better words, get initiated into the lineage of embracing elements from the art of war so they can benefit from it? But any thoughts there, gentlemen, I think would be welcomed.
well, I know somebody who introduced it to me said, hey, read the introduction, read a couple essays in the back, Taking Hold and Sage Commander, and then go through the text and get it on the subconscious. Go through it many times. Reading it once isn't going to be enough, right? But go through it, but then really look at it and take it piece by piece. I think bouncing it against, what do you see as effective leaders? Looking at effective leaders around you, and then as you're going through the text, what are those aspects that you see in them that apply to the text? And then take it a step further. Say, well, I'm not seeing that, but if I look a little deeper here, maybe I will discover these things, right? So if you see a servant leader, for example, look at them and see what pieces can you apply directly, but then read the text a little further and see if there's other things you might not have seen before that you can find within that leader as well to help open eyes to a whole other perspective. That's one thought.
Great.
Yeah, I think one of the great things that you exposed for us early on that I still think is a lesson that I try to take to heart each day, and that I think anybody new to the text and really to practice needs to keep in mind, is the concept of being comfortable with the chaos and being aware of the fact that it's that desire to control or to exert some influence without deeply seeking to really understand the environment that you're operating in, on the small, on the at a much larger scale. It's applicable, and it's being able to steady yourself, and it's something I think all of us. I don't want to speak for you. I mean, just generally, all of us sometimes struggle with that. The ability to just allow things to be what they are. Really take a steady and mindful approach to engaging them, and wait for the node to expose itself, and really these things are applicable at any level and in everyday life. So I think if one approaches the teachings in that way and thinks about it's not necessarily speaking about one certain circumstance or context. It's not applicable just to your work or to these are important learnings that each of us can take away and apply in all aspects of life.
I remember the folks at the client we were talking about in Chicago, and they said it was like running down a dark hallway at full speed, right? Being comfortable with that chaos and knowing if you trip up, the person next to you is going to grab you before you fall, right? And just trusting it in the environment around you. Once they got to that place, it was pretty, it was fun. I think the one thing, looking back, if you look at, appraisals and the 5 and taking it forward, I think it's some of this stuff though, looking at it now in terms of, you can draw these one-to-one correlations, and I think it's like reading the book and seeing it on a superficial level, and you can start seeing how it applies today. But then, are they looking, these folks that are looking at, are they looking at it going forward? Like, hey, here are some of the best practices, and I can find that best practice here. How about those things that aren't really acknowledged as best practices yet, right? But it's already in the form, right? That this stuff is here. It's 2,300 years old. This stuff is there. Things like the ultimate, where they talk about method, right, is one of the 5, and the ultimate in form is giving the formlessness, right? The ultimate in the military is going from form to formlessness and be able to shape and morph, like, and they call it spirit-like, to be, to take the shape of water. You go around and flow things. I think that is really a talk to looking beyond agility in some of these things into anti-fragility, right? And be able to shape and get to a whole new, having an organization where you can build products and services on a whim just by putting together feature bundles. That your capabilities in your organization is running so strong, you can meet those needs almost instantly, right? And things like, building products or, the capabilities and formula, and, the agile community, some of these folks are all about, steady teams, and we have to have these well-formed, long-lasting teams, And that's actually something that's slowing an organization down. If you get to the point where you have communities where you have these deep capabilities and you can just blend together the skills when you need them in real time to solve particular problems, it produces results for the customer in ways that the competition never even imagined. I think there's examples even at Lockheed SpaceX and what they're able to do. A small organization didn't exist until 20 years ago, went toe to toe to somebody like United Launch Alliance, which is our company, and Boeing. And really, SpaceX put 80% of the mass into orbit last year. And that really woke up our organization, which I think really helped drive the transformation that we're going through. That we have to, if you look at some of the Musk companies, they have their challenges in leadership and different approaches. But what they can do is they can put together capabilities faster than people ever imagined. That the fact that they just changed the context of what it means to put satellites in space. They can reuse rockets. No one's doing that. That drives the cost down so low that no one can compete with them.
Yeah. It's amazing what emerges in context. I think you're both emphasizing to really get to the essence, if you will, and live the wisdom, embrace the wisdom, understand the value, leverage the wisdom. And I think it really is not as simply as, hey, let me take a training course, let me read it, but you have to experience it. And having I would say very openly, having a guide like yourselves. I mean, either of you as a guide where someone can experientially tap into the wisdom is a whole different journey than, hey, read a book or read a chapter and not reflect on it. And how does it relate to what you've experienced today, and what does that mean, and how do you interpret your experience based on that lens? So definitively a very, very different journey. So I know we're coming up on time, gentlemen, and there's many things we could explore. I'll say, just in the time we have left, maybe kind of closing thoughts as to what you would love for people to really just take away from our conversation, or anything else that you just want them to run with, if you will.
I think it's just re-emphasizing when we talk about the art of war, it's really talking about win-win. How do we really appreciate the ecosystem and those around us, and really understand that the Tao isn't just your vision, but what's the vision of all those elements within your context, right? Understand the vision and what's the purpose of the people around you, and help understand that so you can help shape that together. So it's not power over, but I think what we talked about, in the last session, you talked about the power with, right? Seek the win-win. As sage commanders, your job as a sage commander is to grow other sage commanders, right? Grow others with that mindset of really looking at the world through the lens of taking whole, right? Leadership is really looking at taking whole. Victory without battle.
I love that where you ended. I think that's it, right? You can, to kind of paraphrase probably not all that effectively. You can win without going to battle, and that's when you really have achieved greatness. To really understand what is that opportunity to take the whole and to achieve a win without ever having to engage in any kind of aggressive conflict. I think too frequently, too few of us see the opportunities for that.
Yeah. And we start on the other end of the spectrum, where we start with aggression.
Yeah. Assume that it's necessary. Yeah. And see things so myopically that you think that it is me versus them. And,
very much so.
And quite frequently, it's our own perspective that brings that,
And as you're enlighten others around you so they can see it as well. Help grow that mindset, the win-win mindset, that orientation.
And to echo, and even almost put a wrap around everything that we've said and we've shared, and specifically those takeaway points. What has always struck me about the art of war is its naturalness. It is so natural within us. I mean, children do it so naturally that they don't recognize it. And through the journeys of education and what have you, and socialization and domestication, as I like to say, we get it knocked out of us. So
Yeah.
if you return to the natural, rewilding ourselves is another phraseology, in the sense not aggression, but rather finding that wisdom within us. So very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So gentlemen, a pleasure as always. Anything else to add before I just mention a few things about the upcoming panels? Anything else to add?
No, just
Take it
thank you,
away.
Cy, for putting it together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you,
Likewise.
gentlemen. Thank you both. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Brad, for taking the time to share. Definitively, a lot more can be said, and both of you for taking the time. I know it took us a little bit of time to schedule these things, but I think very, very valuable. And I would encourage folks to reach out to these two fine gentlemen, and please feel free to reach out to me likewise, for anything. This is the first panel. Definitely, we've got a number of panels coming up. Very much looking forward to exploring the journeys that those individuals have taken. And by all means, we continue learning together. So thank you both. Thank you for all those who joined us. And we look forward to our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.